Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be looking at the power of customs and traditions. And you've brought some really fascinating writings on the topic.
Yeah, they're really interesting. They bring together all kinds of different perspectives, like history and philosophy and psychology.
Even a little bit of Buddhist thought in there too,
Right.
right? It's really cool, like a tapestry of ancient wisdom.
I love that.
I think our listeners are going to be surprised by how relevant this stuff is to, well, to their lives today,
For sure.
So, are you ready to jump in?
Absolutely.
All right, let's do it. So one of the first things that jumped out at me from these writings is, well, it's about customs that can seem a little bit superstitious on the surface.
Okay.
For example, some families say grace before meals.
Yeah.
But the text suggests there's actually a lot more to that than just, tradition. What do you think?
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's definitely not just a formality. When you think about it, expressing gratitude, even for something as basic as a meal, it can really shift your perspective.
How so?
Well, you move from a place of scarcity to a place of abundance. It's pretty powerful.
I can see that.
And the interesting thing is that in Buddhism, gratitude is actually a key element on the path to enlightenment.
Really?
Yeah. It's all about recognizing the interconnectedness of everything and appreciating that web of causes and conditions that actually brought that food to your table.
Wow, that's a beautiful way to look at it. Yep. So it's not just about good manners then, it's really about cultivating a much deeper awareness and appreciation for everything around us.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
And what's really cool? Modern psychology is actually starting to support this ancient wisdom.
Is that right?
Yeah, there are all these studies now that show that practicing gratitude can really reduce stress, increase happiness, even improve your physical health. It's like our ancestors were onto something, way before we had scientific evidence to back it up.
It really is incredible.
Yeah.
It's like they understood the power of the mind-body connection centuries ago.
Yeah.
Speaking of powerful connections, the texts also talk about the role of rituals around major life events, like birth, marriage, even death. It seems like these were way more than just celebrations, weren't they?
Definitely not. In Buddhism, these rituals serve as really powerful reminders of impermanence. The idea that everything is in constant flux.
Right.
It's a core concept in Buddhist teachings. It's called anicca. And so these rituals weren't really about marking a change in your status or anything. It was about something much deeper, like helping people, individuals and communities, really, to cope with these big life transitions and to kind of acknowledge the bittersweet nature of change.
That makes me think about how these rituals might have provided like a framework, for people to process those huge, overwhelming emotions. Not just for the individual going through the transition, but for their whole community as well.
Yeah, you're right. It's a really great point. It probably offered a sense of continuity, a sense of support. Like, you're not alone in this,
Yeah.
And that really ties back into Buddhist thought, this emphasis on community, interconnectedness. It's like a huge part of it.
And it seems like that sense of community is something we're really craving in our modern world, isn't it?
Totally. I mean, things are so fast-paced and sometimes isolating.
Yeah, it's easy to feel disconnected. So we've got gratitude, we've got these powerful rituals that connect us to something bigger. What else did you find interesting in these texts?
Well, this idea of aligning with life's natural rhythms really stuck with me. The texts talk about these daily practices, like greeting the sunrise with specific rituals.
Oh, like meditation.
Yeah.
Or yoga at dawn.
Exactly, things like that. It's almost like they were hitting the reset button for the day,
Makes sense.
And the fascinating thing is how these ancient practices connect with the Buddhist idea of mindfulness, being fully present in each moment.
So these sunrise rituals were like a way to cultivate focus and clarity.
Yeah, and a sense of connection to the natural world.
It's like they were setting an intention for their whole day with that single act of mindful awareness.
Precisely.
Wow, that's powerful. And speaking of intention, the texts also dive into how our ancestors thought about their homes and like the placement of objects. It wasn't just about decorating, was it?
No, not at all. It goes much deeper than that. Practices like feng shui, for example, which comes from ancient China, were about creating spaces where energy could flow freely.
Oh, interesting. So it's about how our environment influences our well-being, right?
Exactly. It's almost like they were early adopters of mindful design.
That's a great way to put it. So it's not just about what you put in your space, but the intention behind it and how that energy affects you. It's making me think about all the clutter in my apartment. Maybe I need to channel some of that ancient wisdom and do some mindful decluttering. But, beyond the practical side of things, these texts also explore some deeper lessons we can learn from the past, especially about resilience. I mean, it's incredible to think about what our ancestors went through.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine having to face, like, harsh winters without central heating, or dealing with illness without modern medicine.
They had to be tough. And that's what's so fascinating about exploring these traditions, isn't it? It's like we're uncovering this innate human strength, this wisdom that's carried us through centuries of challenges.
I completely agree.
It's almost like their experiences hold a map for us to navigate our own struggles.
I love that, a map. And the texts actually highlight how much we can learn from both their triumphs and their mistakes,
Right. It's about recognizing those patterns of resilience and adaptation that are woven into, well, the human story. And maybe understanding those patterns can help us navigate all the complexities of our modern world.
Maybe so.
You know what, before we go any further, let's pause for a moment and take it all in. We've covered gratitude, rituals, mindfulness, intentionality.
Yeah.
Even touched on resilience.
It's a lot to process.
It really is. It's amazing how these simple concepts can hold such profound meaning, isn't it? Are you ready to continue our exploration?
Absolutely. I'm really eager to see where this takes us. It feels like we're just scratching the surface here. So, this idea of resilience we were just talking about, it kind of leads into another fascinating theme that I noticed throughout these writings.
Okay, what's that?
The power of legacy. And I don't just mean like grand historical figures or big monuments or anything like that.
Right.
It's about the energy that's embedded in everyday objects and spaces even.
Interesting. So you're saying it's about more than just like the physical object itself.
Exactly. It's about the stories that those objects hold and the connections they represent. The text suggests that for our ancestors, objects weren't just like things,
Yeah.
They saw them as, as imbued with energy, like a kind of living memory almost.
Wow, that's a cool way to think about it.
Right. Think about like those treasured family heirlooms we all have.
Sure.
Like a worn photograph or a piece of handmade jewelry, or even like a hand-stitched quilt,
Oh, yeah, totally.
There's something about those objects.
It's true. They definitely hold more than just monetary value, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's like when you hold something like that, it's almost as if you're touching history.
Yeah. You can almost feel the presence of the people who made them and use them, like a tangible link to the past.
That's exactly it. And from a Buddhist perspective, this really ties back into that concept of interconnectedness. That idea that everything is woven together in this web of causes and conditions, and those objects kind of become like a tangible representation of that.
Right. It makes me think about like how our culture is today.
Yeah.
It's so disposable.
It is, yeah.
Like we often see things as replaceable instead of seeing them as holding, well, like you said, those memories and meanings.
That's a really insightful observation. And actually, it's something these texts encourage us to reconsider. What if we honored those objects a little more?
Yeah.
What if we tried to see the energy that they hold? Because maybe by doing that, we could tap into a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world.
I like that. So it's not just about like preserving the past for history's sake, right? It's more about recognizing the wisdom that those objects hold and the stories they tell.
Absolutely.
And using that as kind of a guide for living a more meaningful life in the present.
Precisely. And it's not even limited to objects that get passed down through families.
Really?
Yeah. These texts also talk about honoring objects and spaces in like a broader sense. Think about ancient temples or sacred groves, or even just, the simple act of creating a really intentional space in your own home, like a space that feels good to be in.
It makes me think of that Japanese concept, wabi-sabi.
Yeah.
Finding beauty in imperfection. And like appreciating the wear and tear that comes with age and use.
Such a good example. And it ties right back to that core Buddhist principle of impermanence too. Recognizing that everything's in this constant state of flux.
Yeah.
And that beauty can be found in that, in the creation and the decay and the renewal. It's a cycle.
This is making me look at my own surroundings so differently. It's like everything has a story to tell, a lesson to teach, if we're just willing to listen.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's not just about decluttering our physical space then, is it? It's about decluttering our minds too.
Yeah.
Like creating more space for that awareness, for appreciation.
I love that. But, speaking of those who came before us, the texts also talk about, well, about learning from their experiences, both the positive and the challenging ones.
Yeah, sure.
It's almost as if they're holding up this mirror to us, showing us patterns in our own lives that we might not see otherwise.
That's a really powerful image. And one of the ways they did that, one way that wisdom was passed on, through stories, myths, legends, folk tales. In Buddhism, stories are actually a really important way of teaching, of illuminating the path to enlightenment.
They really are. It's fascinating.
I just thought of those Zen koans, those those little paradoxical riddles.
Totally.
They're supposed to make you think outside the box.
Yeah.
Not always easy to understand, but they often spark those aha moments.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is that these stories, even though they're rooted in a specific time and place, right?
Yeah.
They often hold these universal truths, like things that go beyond cultural boundaries.
Like this.
They speak to something deeper, that shared human experience of trying to find meaning and purpose and connection.
Yeah, like they're offering a roadmap for navigating life's complexities.
Right. A roadmap. I like that. It doesn't matter if you're facing some kind of personal crisis or a challenge at work or even just trying to figure out where you fit in.
It's all there in those stories.
Yeah. And what I think is so cool is that they don't shy away from the tough stuff either.
What do you mean?
Well, they acknowledge the hard parts of life, the suffering, the loss, the impermanence.
Yeah.
But they also point towards the possibility of healing, growth, transformation. Even.
Right. So it's about finding that balance then.
Yeah. It's about acknowledging the darkness without getting lost in it.
Right.
And recognizing the light without pretending the shadows aren't there.
That's beautifully put. And I think this whole idea of balance is really central to Buddhist teachings.
It is. Especially the idea of the middle way. Finding that path that avoids extremes and that leads to greater peace and understanding.
It's like they understood that life is this dance between opposing forces. And that true harmony comes from embracing it all. The light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow.
Exactly. And that acceptance, that willingness to embrace everything, the whole spectrum of human experience, it's key to cultivating resilience.
Interesting. So you're saying it's about recognizing that challenges are just, they're an inevitable part of life.
Yeah, but that by facing them with courage and compassion, we can actually come out stronger on the other side, wiser even.
Wow, this is so thought-provoking. It's like we're weaving together this tapestry of ancient wisdom and modern understanding. We've talked about legacy, the importance of honoring objects and spaces, the lessons embedded in stories, this whole concept of balance as a path to resilience.
It is amazing, isn't it, how all these seemingly different pieces are kind of coming together.
They really are. And the best part is, it's an ongoing process, right?
Definitely.
As we continue to explore these texts and delve deeper into our own experiences, we'll keep uncovering new layers of meaning.
I think so.
But for now, let's pause and just reflect on what we've discovered so far. What's resonating with you? What questions are popping up? Any new perspectives?
What's really striking me is how much wisdom our ancestors had. It's a wisdom that often gets, overlooked, I think, in this busy, tech-driven world we live in.
Yeah, I agree.
But when we actually slow down and listen, and really engage with these teachings, there's such a depth of understanding there.
Absolutely. It's like we're rediscovering this forgotten language almost. This way of seeing the world that connects us back to, to something bigger than ourselves.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
But before we get, too caught up in the big picture, maybe we should bring it back down to earth a little bit and think about how all of this can be applied to our daily lives. Ready for the last leg of our journey?
Let's do it.
Okay, so we've covered all these amazing connections between ancient wisdom and, our modern lives. But it's not just about looking back, is it? It's about using all this knowledge to create a more meaningful future.
You got it. It's about taking these timeless principles, like gratitude, mindfulness, intentionality, connection, and actually weaving them into our lives today.
And what I find so fascinating is that in the text, it's not about just copying the past exactly.
Right.
It's about adapting those core values to fit our modern world. I mean, we might not greet the sunrise with a chant, but we can still create a morning routine that helps us start the day with intention.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you, what resonates with you, and then making it your own.
Yeah, like taking those ancient seeds of wisdom and planting them, so to speak.
I love that analogy. It's like you plant those seeds in the fertile ground of your own life
Right.
and let them blossom in all these new and unique ways.
One thing that really stood out to me, though, is the importance of slowing down, like resisting that constant urge to rush, to multitask. Our ancestors just lived at a different pace, didn't they?
They really did. Their lives were, in a lot of ways, dictated by the rhythms of nature, the changing seasons, the sun rising and setting. And I think in that slowness and that attunement to the natural world, they found a depth of connection and meaning that, well, that we often miss in this fast-paced, tech-driven world of ours.
It makes you wonder what we sacrificed, Like, have we traded depth for speed?
That's a good question. Have we given up a sense of presence, of connection, just for the sake of, well, efficiency, productivity?
Right.
It's something to think about, that's for sure.
So what can we do? Like, what if we just consciously chose to slow down? To actually savor the moment,
Yeah.
To be still.
Well, in Buddhism, slowing down and cultivating mindfulness are, well, they're really essential. Like, they're key for developing wisdom and compassion.
It's like hitting that pause button, Like, we're so often on autopilot, and we're just giving ourselves permission to just be.
Absolutely.
And the text actually suggests that this whole practice of mindfulness, of slowing down and paying attention, it actually allows us to access, like a deeper kind of wisdom, both within ourselves and in the world around us.
It's about shifting from a mindset of always doing to a mindset of just being. And in that space of being, that's when we can really open ourselves up to new possibilities, new perspectives, new ways of understanding, ourselves and the world around us.
This whole deep dive has been such a powerful reminder that the past isn't just, a bunch of dusty relics.
Oh, yeah.
It's a living source of wisdom. And it can really guide us towards a more fulfilling, more meaningful future.
And, as we've been going through these texts together, it's become really clear that it's not just about, remembering the past. It's about actually embodying that wisdom, bringing those timeless principles into how we live our lives.
Exactly. It's about taking that ancient wisdom and using it to create a more mindful present, a more intentional present, a more connected present, and, hopefully a more compassionate and balanced future.
I love that. I think that's a perfect way to summarize our journey today.
It's been so great exploring these ideas with you.
Likewise. And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've walked away with some valuable insights, maybe even had a few aha moments along the way. But remember, the journey doesn't stop here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, keep looking for those connections between the past, the present, and the future.